Hey everybody, welcome back to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. I'm joined here with Richard Osmond, President and CEO of Element 29 Resources. Richard, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Dan.
Really appreciate it. Want to start off real quickly, how's the show been for you? I've been talking to a lot of CEOs, a lot of companies. Everyone's telling me that the sentiment has really been on the up and up, but want to know what your thoughts are right now.
Yeah, I think it's a new year. It's always a good thing about these two conferences, the VBRIC and the Roundup, is that it's the beginning of the year. You can get a sense right away of how things are going to go. And I thought, yeah, exactly what you said. It's very upbeat and people are always very optimistic. And I think that's a great way to start the year.
Absolutely. So you guys are a copper story. Copper is always interesting. It's very cyclical, as we know. Last year, a lot of guys who were at the Metals Investors Forum, even at VRIC, they were saying copper is going to catch a bid. Traditionally, it's done very well in the first half of the year or the first quarter of the year. And now we're seeing sort of the same thing. China's been on the forefront of that. Mortgage rates, I think the 30-year mortgage rate is dropping down. What is your general take on what's happening in China just for copper prices into this year?
Yeah, I've been looking at a little bit on the, how much inventory there is stock in like the Shanghai and LME and whatnot. And you can sort of see a buildup of inventory going into like the end of the year, but it then starting to drop off again very quickly. So, you get a sense that people are like, it being a very good indicator of how the economy is moving. You can get a sense that like the inventories are pretty close to like all-time lows. And that gives you a sense that, even though the copper price dropped back to like probably about $4.15 or even down to like $4.02 at one point last year, it's rebounded very quickly. And now you can start to see the inventory start to sort of get drawn down again, which it tells me that, things are starting to move. And, last year this time, I think the copper price started to move again, like you said, and by July it was over $5 a pound. It was up to about $5.11,
Yeah.
And that's sort of the peak season for building and construction and things like that, right?
Yeah. Talk about what's happening right now. I mean, US, you guys are in Peru and we'll get to that. But just the general sense of, new administration coming in, what's your sense on it? Is that good for the industry? What are your general thoughts on the incoming administration?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think, certainly some of the policies coming out of the U.S. with the new administration are really a little bit more populist in the sense of they're talking about like putting on lots of tariffs, things like that. But, copper is where you find it, so we're looking for copper in Peru. The U.S. government had to go around the world looking for copper, the government as well as corporations, American, they have to go where the copper is to get it. So for us, the more populous things become, there's a bigger demand for assets by different countries, right? Yeah. So it doesn't really matter to us either way. If the tariffs slow the economy down, then my opinion is that there will be a bigger demand for acquisition of assets globally. So China will be going to Peru, the second largest copper producing country in the world.
Yep.
Looking for assets. They'll be going to Chile, the Congo, whatever the case may be, right? So, and they'll be competing with the U.S. and other countries around the world that are looking to, that are big players, I guess, in the copper space.
So either way, I think demand for copper is just going to go up pretty aggressively here, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to change much.
Yeah. Okay. You obviously mentioned you're in Peru. It's one of the jurisdictions I think perhaps many of the generalists or the investors in our audience are not necessarily familiar with. They hear stories about, Colombia, Brazil, it's doing well. What was it about Peru specifically that attracted, the attention for Element 29? And I guess the follow-up question to that is when you did find that particular asset, why was that the right asset in your mind to go after and take hold?
Yeah, one of the things that I learned very early on in exploration is that copper deposits are very hard to find. And the timeline between discovering a copper project that's like a tier 1 level, which would, something that a major mining company would be interested in acquiring, they take roughly 10 to 15 years to explore and just to get started to develop. So you're almost looking at a cycle of about 15 to 20 years
Yep.
of exploration and development before you're pulling a pound of copper out of the ground, right? So, for us, because of the scale and the amount of money that goes into building these things, companies like BHP, I don't think are going to go into really unstable jurisdictions to develop mines, right? They're going to be looking for jurisdictions where they know they have like free trade agreements in place between countries where they are where they reside, and the countries are looking to develop projects in, and they're also looking at protection of investment. So, for example, Canada and the U.S. both have free trade agreements with Peru, and also they have bilateral investment treaties with Peru. So that means that there's no double taxation. You can get money flowing back and forth from both countries, and also, a company like BHP will feel a lot more comfortable putting the billions of dollars needed to develop a porphyry project in a country like Peru versus some other country that don't have these treaties in place.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, copper deposits are probably one of the rarest to find right now. I think even more rare than gold deposits or silver deposits. Even though that there is a scarcity component there too, right?
It is very much so, and I mean we recognize that and it's the main reason why we wanted to get into copper. We always said copper is really what moves energy to market. So, if you got like companies like Microsoft and Amazon going out looking to buy nuclear facilities, power plants to actually develop enough power to run their data server banks and things like that.
Or AI, right? We were just talking about that before.
Exactly. Then, you got to have copper to move that energy around. And I think it's going to be, I don't think people realize the scale of what's happening when you're getting into this type of high-tech economy kind of thing.
Definitely. Your flagship project, Elida, I think it's Western Central Peru, if I'm not mistaken. You guys had an estimated or initial inferred mineral resource of about 321 million tons, graded at 0.32, if I'm not mistaken, copper. And there was also a little bit of silver and some gold in there, just some gold in there as well. So I guess...
Oh, it was moly.
It was moly, yes. My apologies. But there's strong concentration. Anytime you can get more than 0.2% copper, I mean, you're definitely onto something, right? So talk to us about what the plan is for this year. What are you most excited about? And what should investors be paying attention to, specifically with that last drilling result?
Yeah, so we put together an early stage resource back in 2022 based on roughly about 14,000 meters of drilling, which is like very little, and what we wanted to sort of show was that at least, there's a resource there that we can continue to build on. And generally speaking, you use a 0.2 cutoff, that's what the engineers like to use at least, because if you go too low, then really it doesn't make economically viable sense. And if you go too high, it looks like there's some kind of issue with the project. Why is the cost so high, right, for a cutoff grade? So we ended up sort of using a 0.2 as sort of our magic number for cutoff grade. And we put together a 321.7 million ton resource at 0.32 copper at that cutoff grade, 0.3 moly and 2.6 molybdenum and 2.6 grams per ton silver, with a strip ratio of 0.74 to 1. That strip is really low. That means you're only moving like 3/4 of a ton of waste for every ton of ore that you're putting into the mill. And that makes for like a fairly strategic asset, right? Like a low cost operation. The project is at a low elevation. It's at like 1,600 meters elevation. You look in Antamina, the 7th largest copper mine in the world. It's actually about 4,500 meters elevation. There's things that don't work at those levels, right?
Yeah, especially the drilling angles and stuff. That's always a challenge.
Yeah. And we're close to the coast. We're actually closer to the Antamina port than Antamina is, and we can actually drive there from our project. So all these things sort of factor into, why we have such a low cutoff grade in our resource. But at the same time, the moly credits are probably twice what you see in most porphyry systems. So that adds a lot of value, between 20 and 30% of the value based on the copper price, based on the moly price.
Moly price, yeah.
That we haven't even factored into the sort of like the copper equivalent grade of that resource. We haven't been able to do that until we actually do the metallurgical test work, which we're planning to do. And then we can really show what the overall value is per ton kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. The interesting thing about Peru too is kind of just like the community aspect of it, right? When you go into these sort of different parts of the world, obviously not Canada, but when you go down to South America, there's a really strong emphasis on obviously being close with the communities, building the culture there, immersing yourself within that group. And, we'd be curious, I'd be curious to know, when you go down to that mine site, like how involved have you guys been with the communities there? And obviously, the big upside is there's possible job creation, which is the big one. But, when you look at that part of the world and where the project is, how involved have you guys been with that community as a whole?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the mining regulations in Peru, they don't include this. Well, you have to have the surface rights in order to operate, right? Even to do exploration. And for that, you have to deal with the landowners. In the case of Peru, most of the ground is either held by government or communities. And, I grew up in a mining town, and I have a lot of passion for giving back to the communities that we work in. It adds a lot of value to the communities. So what we want to do is we want to try and find ways to add economic value. So we're providing jobs, and we're providing a little bit of support directly to the community for leasing the ground that we're drilling on. But they're very open and they're very enthusiastic about working with us and actually partnering with us to move this project forward. We bring them in, probably more drilling, about 15 people on a 2-week rotation, and throughout the entire drill program.
Any specific reason why you do that rotation?
Yeah, we want to get as many people in the community as possible working on the project.
Nice.
And that way they understand what we're doing, they understand the value we're creating, and how hard of work it is. It's not easy. We're not up there sort of destroying the environment. We're not up there doing things that they think they don't understand about exploration. And what we want to do is sort of teach them, right, exactly what's involved. So at the same time, we provide them with training, lots of health and safety training, and we teach them how to be technicians on the drill programs, like cutting core and doing all of the QA/QC prepping kind of thing, right? So I think those are real positives for the community, and they really appreciate having us there and providing that support.
Nice. Very cool. So, just wrapping up here, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. I mean, if you could tell our audience specifically, why should they put Element 29 on their watch list and possibly in their portfolios?
Well, I think copper projects, really good ones, are really rare, hard to find. And, we spent about 7 to 8 years building this portfolio in a world-class mining jurisdiction. You can't just walk out and pick up these types of deposits. You have to build them over a long period of time. So for that reason, I think, we're continuing to grow our projects. We're continuing to de-risk them, add value. And I mean, we're experts at that. That's what we do.
Right.
People should trust that we know what we're doing. I've worked with major mining companies on fairly advanced projects for a lot of my career. I've seen, the different categories of projects as they stage through that process. So I think, we're there to basically build value, and that's what we hope to do.
Awesome. Well, Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show here. And if you're going to PDAC, I mean, investors are probably going to see you guys there too. But you can find the Element 29 resources on their website, and the ticker is
ECU.
ECU. It's very easy to remember there, guys. Anyway, that wraps it up. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.